The BYU Cougars got their guy in Robert Wright. They upset the Baylor Bears in the process, and quite frankly, I think they got a better fit for their offense than even Egor Demin.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. As always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about Robert Wright III, who's reportedly signed with the BYU basketball program and how he fits in with this lineup under Kevin Young. Then we'll talk about interesting dichotomy of statements from BYU boosters versus the Commissioner of Church Education, Clark G. Gilbert. Who's right? Can both be true? We'll get into that, and then we'll finish up today's show with our overflowing mailbag. I didn't get to get all of the questions in I had yesterday when we did it, so we'll get to the rest of those as we round out today's show. All right, so big news. Robert Wright III is a BYU Cougar. That right there, congratulations are in order to the BYU basketball program. They got one of the top prospects in the transfer portal. He reportedly is signed, sealed, and delivered. Now, that hasn't been officially announced by BYU. I would expect that it comes at any point. I'm recording this podcast late Thursday night, so interest of full disclosure, it may be out by the time some of you watch and or listen to this podcast. But the bigger point is BYU's getting a top-tier talent out of the transfer portal, a bona fide five-star prospect, both out of the high school ranks and in the transfer portal rankings, according to 24/7 Sports. And oh, by the way, all he did as a freshman this past season was match essentially what Egor Demin did in terms of output. He was an all Big 12 freshman honoree, and Robert Wright III is going to be, I feel like, a perfect fit for BYU, even more so than Egor Demin. And allow me to explain before y'all jump down my throat, even though I fully expect you to jump down my throat for making such a statement. The point I'm trying to make here is I believe that Egor Demin is going to be a better NBA player than he ever was in his lone year at BYU. He is a guy that when you have ability to move freely, and in the NBA, you cannot put your hands on guys like you can in the collegiate basketball game. The NBA is a free-flowing game, and if you so much as like seemingly breathe on guys when they're trying to drive in the NBA, you get called for fouls. In college basketball, you can all but like assault a guy, and sometimes it won't call it. Egor Demin at 6'9" has got a whole lot of surface area for defenders to contact him in, and they contacted him in a myriad of different ways this past year, and it affected his overall play. Yes, he finished with a flourish. I thought he really learned how to adapt and play at a high level, obviously late in the season in the Big 12 and the NCAA tournaments. But my point is that I believe Egor Demin is going to be a better pro basketball player than he ever was as a college basketball player. Whereas a guy like Robert Wright III, who when I watch his highlight reel, I like to use the term he's a pit bull out there. And what that is you heard the phrase all the time. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. Robert Wright III is listed at 6'1". I don't know if he stands 5'11" or 6 foot. I don't care what it is. He is absolutely unafraid on the basketball court. He gets downhill. He contorts his body in the air. He finds incredibly awkward and just crazy angles to shoot the ball from, but it's effective. You can tell this kid loves to ball, and even though he is relatively diminutive, again, as compared to a guy like Egor Demin and probably the vast majority of the guys he plays alongside out there, he is fearless. He goes to the hole with reckless abandon, and he finishes at a very, very high rate. The other part about it is he shot 35.3% from three this year. Now, it's not a super high number, but that's more than respectable. He averaged 11.5 points, more than 4 assists as a true freshman on a really, really solid Baylor team. And yes, I get that Baylor fans are upset. Our good friend Cam Stewart, he was very explicit in his thoughts about losing Robert Wright III to BYU, but Baylor's loss is a major, major gain for Kevin Young and the BYU Cougars. I think what Robert Wright III offers is a drive and kick mentality. Either he's getting to the rim and scoring, or he's going to find guys to kick it out to, and that's going to create opportunities for BYU to continue to rain threes from the corner, from the top of the key. I love the thought of a guy like Robert Wright III, his ability to get to the rim and to have a rim roller like a guy like Keba Keita playing alongside him. And that doesn't even preclude what he could do as the guy playing off of Richie Saunders and, more importantly, an AJ Dybantsa. The lineup BYU has right now that I project as their starting lineup right now, I'd have Keba Keita at the center, obviously. The 4 spot, you can insert anybody at this point. Maybe it's Dominic Diomande. Maybe it's Mihailo Boskovic, who announced he's officially running it back with BYU, if that matters to you. But at the wing positions, it's Richie Saunders, it's AJ Dybantsa. And that's me assuming that Richie's coming back, but I don't have anything telling me that he's not going to run it back for BYU at this point. So I'm projecting that. And then at point guard, it's Robert Wright III. I think that is a very, very potent lineup, and the ability to mix and match and interchange and play different styles with all those players on the court, I think it's going to make BYU in many respects even more dangerous than they were this past year. And once again, the point I'm trying to get across here is that Robert Wright III looks like a tailor-made fit for BYU, and BYU targeted him very heavily in the transfer portal. They have not reportedly, and that obviously it all kind of depends on if an agent or a player decides to put out which schools they're talking to. But if you look at the overall number of schools, the overall number of transfer portal players that BYU has reportedly talked to, it's actually kind of small relative to what I would have expected. But I think the bigger point to be made is that Justin Young is the director of recruiting, Kevin Young and his staff. They have been much more targeted in terms of trying to find the right guys out there, loving them up, and getting them on their roster. And that's exactly what Robert Wright III is here. That's what Dominic Diomande is. Could a guy like a Tyron Stokes, if he decides to ultimately reclassify into the 2025 class, I expect BYU to make a strong move in that direction. I think Makai Mason, who we've also talked about from Washington as a dead-eye shooter, would be a fantastic fit. So the bigger point is BYU's been very strategic about which players they've gone after. And when they've gone after these guys, so far, apparently, they have won these recruiting battles, and none bigger than Robert Wright III. I think his ability to attack the rim, to draw the defense in, kick it out, or find a way to finish at the rim, that's exactly what BYU wants. And it's not a like-for-like replacement with Egor Demin, because you can't just replace a 6'9" point guard, because it's Robert Wright III's listed at 6'1", but they both play a different style of basketball. But the downhill nature, the pit bull nature of Robert Wright III, I think is a really, really nice fit. And I'm not the only one saying it. Evan Miyakawa, who does a lot of advanced analytics out there, evanmia.com, if you want to check it out. He does a really, really good job breaking down how different guys fit in things. He calls it a home run pickup for BYU. He projects it as an A+, offensively A+, defensively A-. It's not a bad spot to be if you're BYU, because he projects him as one of the best players, an impact guy coming out of the transfer portal. And that's what you want in the transfer portal. You want impact players, obviously. But the projection is this is just a perfect melding of a top player out in the portal and a top program needing a key replacement, especially at the ball handling point guard position. I think this is a nice pickup, and get excited. That lineup, I'm salivating at the prospect of it, and they aren't even done in terms of putting it all together. How many other weapons could Kevin Young and company add as the portal hunt continues? Get ready. It's going to be must-watch television seemingly every night, it feels like, for this BYU basketball team. Whether you're in it for AJ Dybantsa, you're in it for the entire squad, you're in it because you're just a BYU fan in general, it's going to be a really, really fun basketball season, and Robert Wright III only adds to that excitement. All right, coming up next, interesting dichotomy of statements being put out by BYU boosters versus the Commissioner of Church Education. Who is right in all of this? Can both of them coexist? Can both of these statements live and work together? We'll talk about all of it next, right here on Locked On Cougars. This update is brought to you, this word is brought to you by our friends over at Intuit TurboTax. Tax is obviously a lot of waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. All of us, I don't think I know a single person who enjoys doing their taxes, but the best part is now taxes is just simply matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. Now, we all know that certain date, the tax deadline is coming up. So if you want to get on it now. That expert will give you your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, all while you're getting providing real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day and really anything else going on in your life. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all you so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Disclaimer is that only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only available in the iOS mobile app, and guaranteed details, you can see them at TurboTax.com/guarantees. But once again, get started today by going to TurboTax.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you're doing well on this Friday. This week's kind of flown by, quite honestly. Some of you may not seem that way, but for me, it's gone by very, very quickly. But as always, thank you for all of your support of the podcast. All right, so this is going to get a little messy. I'll just say said here. We have BYU boosters, Mr. Lillianquist, was it Dan or no, Paul Lillianquist, who runs a $500 million company in Lehi, Utah. He told Myron Medcalf back in, I think it was January or February, the infamous quote now that says, "We won't be outbid," speaking of BYU and their NIL efforts. Well, that has obviously lived on, and it's been thrown in BYU's face, both as a positive and a negative thing. But then Clark G. Gilbert, who currently serves as the Commissioner of Church Education for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He sits on the board of directors. He is over all the BYU campuses. That's BYU Hawaii, BYU Idaho, and obviously the flagship Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. He put out 3 principles for BYU athletics on social media yesterday that drew a whole lot of scrutiny, both from BYU fans, but, you know, a certain fan base 40 miles north likes to wear red and likes to crow about all things BYU, even though they have their own program to worry about. You know who I'm talking about. But he says this: principles for BYU athletics. Number 1, no church funding, no debt. That's easy. We've talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast. I spent an entire half of a podcast, it felt like, earlier this week talking about that very thing. The church is not funding it, and there'll be people who throw it back. Well, they're subsidizing the tuition. Great. If you want to quantify that, be my guest. But the simple fact of the matter is, if BYU athletics were being subsidized by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they'd have a whole lot more money to work with. I just leave that right there. No debt. BYU does not allow BYU athletics to debt fund. That's just never going to happen. They have to operate in the black at all times. Number 2, this is where it gets interesting. Engage in NIL competitively, but never the highest bidder. But never, I think he meant to say, never be the highest bidder. Interesting. We'll come back to that one in a moment. And then number 3, focus on mission, coaching, and the BYU environment. And then he has this quote: "This is a place that is different, it is special, and people are finding that out," unquote. Okay. Number 1 and number 3, simple enough. And I've had people from time to time since Kevin Young and Kalani Sitake and this NIL era have really come to the forefront for BYU athletics, express to me that, hey, Jake, are these coaches being very careful about expressing exactly what BYU is all about? Are these players being aware of what the honor code entails? And so far as I'm aware, and I think I've got a fair bit of insight on this because I've talked to people in both programs, and they have been very clear in saying, yes, we know exactly what BYU is all about. We espouse to pass along to these athletes what BYU's mission is. It is a church-affiliated university. The sports department, the athletics department, is the front porch of that university, and it's a massive, like kind of spotlight for what BYU, and by extension, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is all about. That's where it brings me to number 2 here. So we have Paul Lillianquist as a booster saying, quote, "We won't be outbid," but then Clark G. Gilbert, who's got a lot more decision-making power over BYU than a booster does, saying BYU will engage in NIL competitively, but never be the highest bidder. It seems like we've got 2 people on opposite sides, and they're having like this war of words in a way, and who's right? I drew a little ire because I quote tweeted apparently a very infamous Utah troll account, and I apologize for doing that for those of you who really care. But the bigger point is, the question is, are one of these lying? Who's right? What's going on here? Well, I started asking around, talking to some people at BYU. Actually, some people reached out to me originally before I even asked them, and explained that both statements, speaking of, quote, "We won't be outbid," unquote, and, quote, "BYU engage in NIL competitively, but never be the highest bidder," unquote, can live together. And it they're not mutually exclusive. So allow me to kind of send what I understand about all this. BYU will always be competitive in NIL simply due to the fact they have boosters like Mr. Lillian-Quist and dozens of others who have got deep pockets. They will continue to contribute to BYU. Now, the NIL aspect of this is that I think Clark Gilbert is saying, because I said this yesterday on the podcast. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to lift the lid on it, but it's already happened. The Royal Blue Collective is moving in-house at Brigham Young University. It is part of the athletic department now. It's no longer a third-party entity like it was when it was founded, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And now that it's in-house, they will be funding NIL deals alongside all of the revenue sharing that will come into effect with the House settlement. So there will be a level BYU is willing to go to in NIL themselves via the Royal Blue Collective. So how is that square up, Jake? You're making a long statement that should be a much shorter answer. So long story short, the simple fact of the matter is BYU will be willing, speaking of NIL, to go to a certain level. And as Clark Gilbert says, it will be competitive. And then I asked some people and said, okay, how do you then square up that this booster saying we won't be outbid? How does that work out? They said, well, that is where the true NIL will come in. In that case, a booster, whoever it might be, Mr. Lillian-Quist or anybody else out there, if they want to, make it worth an athlete's while to come to BYU, if money is really the main reason why they're coming to BYU, and let's also be very real, BYU is more about, is got more going for it than just paying everybody. Some may disagree with that. But that would be where an NIL deal comes in, where an athlete would sign an agreement with a company to promote a product, to appear on a social media post, whatever it may be. It's the legitimate NIL there. That is where the extra funds that BYU won't be outbid on would come, even though BYU itself and the collective, speaking of the Royal Blue Collective, would only go to a certain level. I hope that makes sense. And that is where I think the rub is evening out here, is that both those statements can be true and coincide and coexist together. You may not want to believe me. Trust me, there's a lot. I've had a fair amount of conversations yesterday ever since I quote tweeted that tweet with people. And there has been all over the place in terms of my mentions on social media. Like I said, text messages that I've shared back and forth, phone calls I've taken. The bigger point is that BYU wants to remain a force in college athletics, and they fully intend to do so. Exactly what Clark Gilbert says here. It says that engage in NIL competitively, but never be the highest bidder. Focus on mission, coaching, and BYU environment. Highlight that BYU does have a specific mission. They've got very good coaching. They've got two really great coaches leading their two biggest athletic department programs. Speaking of men's basketball, Kevin Young and Kalani Sitake over BYU football, but then also the BYU environment. It is a unique environment in Provo. Any of you who have been in Provo know what I'm talking about. If you attended the university, you know how unique it is. BYU can highlight a lot of different things, but in this day and age, because NIL is such a critical component, those two statements can coexist. They can absolutely work together. And I hope that I made some sense in trying to explain it to all y'all, because in my own head, as I'm going through this, I'm like, am I really getting the point across I intended to get across today? But that's beside the point, I suppose. That's what I understand. The more I've thought about it, like this, the conversations I had, like I said, people were reaching out to me before I even reached out to people yesterday, talking about it. And I think that's where these two, because on the surface, you look at these two statements, and I'm doing a two fists if you're listening to this. Essentially, they seem like they'd be butting heads with one another. And the more I talk to people, because it felt like in many respects in my mind that these were two people on two opposite sides, but I don't think they're butting heads so much as they're kind of coming together. And there is going to be money coming from different pots, revenue share, NIL from BYU side of things, and then true NIL from beyond the scope of the university with these boosters. They will sign these athletes to do a social media blitz, to appear on a billboard, to do an appearance for a company at a convention, whatever it is, a convention. They can do a myriad of things to get these players paid. And if that's how they think that they're going to get a leg up on the competition, Go right on ahead. I don't think anybody out there within the sound of my voice, I hope, is upset about the fact that BYU is competitive in NIL and it's going to lead to BYU winning more football and basketball games along the way. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. I'm all in favor of that. I love covering winning programs. Losing programs, not so fun to cover. All right. So hopefully that made sense. Let me know in the comments if I didn't, if I'm up in the night, you think I'm completely crazy, or if you don't think I have any idea of what I'm talking about. Hey, I'll welcome any and all feedback. That means y'all are consuming the content, and I will take that at just base level. That works for me. All right. We'll finish up today's show with our mailbag. I had an overflowing mailbag. Didn't get to, I felt like half of the questions that I had yesterday on the podcast. We're going to finish up this show and get to as many of those, if not all the rest of them, coming up next. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And it's kind of a running joke in the YouTube comments that I keep saying that, but it's just kind of, it's the messaging from the podcast network here, the Locked On Podcast Network. We truly want to be your first listen of the day. We want you to start with us. And that's why it is so ingrained. That's why I seem to introduce it all the time on the podcast. But hey, appreciate all y'all support. And one other thing, I say this all the time, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get everything I'm hearing in the moment coming to your phone in the form of a text message. That's the way to stay the most up to date on everything going on with BYU. And click the link in the show notes below. You get 14 days of a free trial before you're charged a single penny. And it's just $4.99 to be a part of the group every single month. So join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right. So before we go on today's show, I mentioned I had an overflowing mailbag yesterday. So we're going to get to as many, if not all, the rest of the questions that we had. So first one is a basketball-related question that comes from Eric Butler, and he says this: I'm curious what you think about Xavier Staten. I feel like it was a big deal when we signed him, but I haven't heard much about him lately. Do you think he'll be getting minutes right away, or is he more of a developmental prospect? Here's the deal, Eric. I believe the BYU, one of their key remaining needs, if not multiple remaining needs, is big men. Keba Keita is really, really good. Xavier Staten in time is going to, I think, be very good. I still just, based on what I've seen, I think he's a little bit raw, and it may take him a year to really get settled in at the collegiate level. I'd love to be wrong about that. I'd love Xavier to come in as a true 7-footer and really rock it for BYU. And if he does, I'll happily eat my words, as I often do on this podcast. But I think he's more of a little bit of a development project, maybe a year of working to really break out. And in the meantime, you probably have to find somebody in the transfer portal to make up those minutes. But I would think that as the season progresses this upcoming year, and so long as he is progressing, speaking of Xavier, I think he will be given an opportunity to earn minutes, but he will have to earn them. That's the biggest thing about this. That's the big part. All right, Dallin Schultz. Do you know how much NIL, speaking of Robert Wright, he got? I know everybody was saying $3.5 million, but I saw some BYU guys saying it was less. Yes. We had some in-house media at BYU told to quell that rumor. I know some other people, Robbie McCombs out there, was saying that he thought it was $1 million or so less. And I'll back up what Robbie was saying, because that's what I've heard as well, that it's somewhere. So $1 million less, like 2.5. And that falls kind of more in line with what the top tier prospects in the transfer portal cycle have been getting so far. There was a report out there, and the people who said it so often, that Yaxel Lendeborg, who is considered to be the top transfer portal prospect out there, he was going to be $3 million. Well, a guy like Robert Wright III is somewhere in the 1 to 5 range in terms of the overall top portal prospects. He's at worst top 10. So a $2.5 million NIL deal, that falls kind of right in line with, if Yaxel is number 1, he's getting 3. You kind of go down from there, delineating a pattern. And I think that would work out to that number being pretty accurate in my mind. All right, other questions here. Isaac, what position or position group do you feel most confident in for BYU football this fall? Ooh, this is a good question. I will give you 2, one on either side of the football. Offensively, wide receiver. I know they lost Darius last year, and that's obviously a big loss, but here's the deal. Fesi Sitake has done a really, really good job stocking the cupboards and stuffing them with really, really talented wide receivers. You will see Chase Roberts be the lead guy at wide receiver, but do not miss out on JoJo Phillips, Keelan Marion, Parker Kingston, Cody Hagan, Tei Nakua, Dominique McKenzie, on down the list. They have got a ton of talent, and more importantly, a ton of speed at the wide receiver positions. I think that wide receiver group is going to be elite. Defensively, it's the linebacking core. Harrison Taggart, Jack Kelly, and Isaiah Glasgow returning after the havoc they wreaked last year for the BYU defense. Having that trio back, absolutely gargantuan to have them back. I think that linebacking core could be one of the best linebacking cores literally in the country. And there's no hyperbole there. I'm not being hyperbolic. I believe that they are that good, that elite, and they will show themselves and acquit themselves, barring something crazy happening health-wise, to be just that. Let's see, Parley. I want to thank you for everything you've done. I appreciate that, Parley. Any more information on Ryder Lyons? I know that he's still planning on visiting BYU in June, and the latest I'm hearing is that his commitment decision won't come until after he makes those official visits. Everything I hear is that BYU is firmly in the mix for Ryder Lyons, if not the outright leader at this juncture. That should excite you because he is a bona fide 5-star prospect. He's top 10 in the entire country in this recruiting cycle. Brock Harris is very, very close to him. McCabe Madsen, who BYU just signed this past cycle after a big recruiting win, him being a 4-star prospect, he's close to Ryder Lyons. Having guys that he's very close to already locked in with BYU can only help and enhance BYU's chances of landing Ryder Lyons. And I feel at this juncture, as of April 11th, 2025, the BYU is in the lead for Ryder Lyons. All right, other questions here before we go. Okay, another good one here. Okay, this makes me chuckle. So, David McDonough, there's names obviously that may be too sensitive to publicly discuss, but a good mailbag question would be if anyone knows the timing of when coaching staff will cut down the roster to the newly requested 80. It's actually not 85. It's 105 scholarship limit. So that's misstatement there by David. So it's 105, not 85. I think it's sad. I recall that there are people going around and obviously looking at guys at different programs. So the answer to your question, David, is that the cut down from 123 players to 105 players, as it stands right now, expecting the House settlement will be done at some point soon. It was the first hearing to maybe get it settled was earlier this week. Once that's done, the first week of the season will be the deadline for BYU and other college football programs to cut down from 123 players to 105. But Claudia Wilkin, the judge over this case, has said that she may favor a phasing in pattern with that, where maybe this year you're telling people you got to cut from 123 to 120. Next year it's 120 to 115. I don't know what the cut down would be, but over a number of years, a set number of years, you cut down from that 123 man roster to the 105, but it's literally in phases over multiple years. I think most college coaches, if they're going to be forced to accept the 105-man limit, because Kalani Sitake's made it very clear he's not necessarily in favor of it, but if you phase it in where they can not have to cut a bunch of guys all at once, I think they're going to take that pill a whole lot easier than what it's currently looking like, where it's like, hey, we're going to have to really just whack up to 20, 30 guys all of a sudden and say, hey, thanks, but no thanks. Best of luck moving forward. I think that should answer that question. Is I think the best case scenario, if they are going to cut it down, is to have it come in phases. Like I said, maybe five guys, not scholarships, because those are all walk-ons typically, but cut it down by 5 roster slots every year for a 3 or 4 year period to get down to that number of 105. I think that would be the ideal scenario, at least from my vantage point. I think a lot of coaches would agree with that, but I can't speak for them. All right, so that's going to do it. I think I got to all those questions. I think we got through the mailbag. I think I made myself clear on where these two, like I said, factions when it comes to BYU NIL, where they, I think, come together. And yeah, I really do think Robert Wright, he is a massive home run pickup for the BYU basketball program, as I mix and match my metaphors. But as always, I want to thank you guys for your support of the podcast. Have a fantastic weekend. Hey, something crazy happens, I'll be sure to pop back on, but I plan on doing another full edition coming up on Monday, catching up on the weekend that was. But like I said, in the meantime, if anything crazy happens, we'll pop on and do a live edition and react to anything crazy. But enjoy the Masters. If you're a golf fan like myself, you will find me watching a lot of Augusta this weekend. But as always, besides that, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And once again, thank you for being everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.